The Ant and the Cockroach, journey to the lost city. In a quiet corner of a bustling garden, hidden beneath a patch of large, leafy plants, lived two best friends, Andy the Ant and Carlos the Cockroach. Andy was a small, hard-working ant who loved to plan everything down to the tiniest detail. He had a knack for building things and was known in the ant colony as one of the best navigators around. Carlos, on the other hand, was a big, easygoing cockroach with a spirit full of adventure. He loved exploring, making new friends, and always found a way to turn every challenge into a fun experience. One bright and sunny morning, Andy was busy gathering food for his colony. He was making his way back to the ant hill, carrying a large crumb on his back, when he heard a familiar voice calling out to him. "Hey, Andy!" Carlos shouted, waving his antennae. "Guess what I found?" Andy set down his crumb and turned around. "Hi, Carlos. What is it this time?" Carlos grinned, holding up a small, shiny object. It was a piece of a map, with tiny drawings of rivers, mountains, and what looked like a city at the end of it. "A treasure map," Carlos said excitedly. "I found it near the old log in the garden. I think it leads to the lost city of Glitterstone. They say it's filled with glowing crystals and ancient treasures." Andy's eyes widened. He had heard stories of the lost city, a place said to be hidden deep within the garden, past places no ant had ever dared to go. "Carlos, this could be really dangerous. No one knows where the lost city is, and the stories say it's full of tricky paths and creatures we've never seen before." Carlos put an arm around Andy. "Come on, Andy. You're the best navigator in the whole colony, and I'm the bravest cockroach in the garden. Together, we can find it. Think about the adventure. Besides, if there really are treasures, we could bring some back to help the whole colony." Andy hesitated, but the thought of finding the lost city and helping his friends was too tempting to resist. "All right, Carlos, let's do it. But we need to prepare carefully." The two friends spent the rest of the day getting ready. Andy gathered his maps, a compass made from a shiny beetle shell, and some snacks, crumbs and tiny pieces of fruit, while Carlos prepared his trusty leaf sack, where he kept important items like soft moss, and a small, sturdy stick for defense. Early the next morning, as the dew glistened on the garden leaves, Andy and Carlos set off on their big adventure. The garden was alive with activity, birds singing, bees buzzing around flowers, and crickets chirping. As they traveled, Andy studied the map piece Carlos had found. "The map shows that we need to cross the muddy river first," Andy explained. "Then, we go through the twisted roots, over the pebble pass, and finally, we reach the lost city." Carlos nodded, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I've always wanted to see the twisted roots. Let's go." Chapter 1, The Muddy River. The muddy river was the first big challenge. It was a wide, shallow stream that flowed through the middle of the garden, but for tiny creatures like Andy and Carlos, it felt like a vast, rushing river. Andy and Carlos stood at the edge, looking at the fast-moving water. "How are we going to get across?" Carlos asked, scratching his head. Andy thought for a moment. "We'll need to build a raft," he said. "There are some sticks and leaves over there. If we tie them together with some of this long grass, we can make a raft big enough for both of us." The two friends worked together, tying sticks tightly with blades of grass and placing leaves on top to create a platform. Finally, they had a small raft that floated in the water. They pushed it into the river and hopped on. The current was strong, and the raft wobbled as it moved downstream. Carlos grabbed a leaf as a paddle, while Andy used his tiny legs to steer. For a moment, everything seemed to be going smoothly, but then they noticed something splashing in the water ahead. "It's a frog!" Andy shouted. "Hold on tight, Carlos." The frog, a large green creature with wide eyes, leapt toward them. It wasn't trying to hurt them, but its huge jumps sent waves crashing toward their little raft. The waves tossed the raft back and forth, and Carlos used his leaf paddle to keep them steady. "Hey, Mr. Frog," Carlos called out. "Could you help us cross the river?" The frog stopped and looked down at them. "Oh, I didn't see you there, tiny travelers." "Sure, I can give you a boost." The frog gently nudged the raft with his nose, guiding them to the other side of the river. "Thanks, Mr. Frog," Andy and Carlos said in unison. The frog smiled. "Good luck on your journey. Be careful, there are tricky places ahead." Andy and Carlos waved goodbye and continued on their way. They had crossed the muddy river and felt proud of their teamwork. Chapter 2, The Twisted Roots. After crossing the river, the friends arrived at the Twisted Roots, a part of the garden where tree roots tangled together like a giant maze. The roots formed tunnels, bridges, and walls, creating a confusing landscape. "This looks tricky," Andy said, studying his map. "We need to find the path through the roots without getting lost." Carlos grinned. "Leave it to me. I've got a great sense of direction." He dashed ahead, hopping over roots and squeezing through tight spaces. Andy followed, using his map to guide them. They worked together, calling out directions and helping each other climb over the roots. But as they went deeper, the roots grew thicker and the paths narrower. Suddenly, they heard a rustling sound. From behind one of the larger roots emerged a long, wiggly creature with shiny scales, a snake. The snake eyed them curiously, flicking its tongue. "Hello there," the snake hissed. "What brings you two little bugs to my part of the garden?" Andy's antennae twitched nervously, but Carlos stepped forward bravely. "We're looking for the lost city of Glitterstone. We have a map that shows the way." The snake's eyes gleamed. "Ah, the lost city. Many have tried to find it, but few have succeeded. I know these roots well, perhaps I can help. If you solve my riddle." Andy and Carlos exchanged glances. "A riddle?" Andy asked. The snake nodded. "Yes, a riddle. Answer it, and I'll show you the right path through the roots." "All right," Carlos said confidently. "We're ready." The snake smiled. "Very well. Here is your riddle. I'm not alive, but I grow. I don't have lungs, but I need air. I don't have a mouth, and yet water kills me. What am I?" Andy furrowed his brow, thinking hard. Carlos scratched his head. "Not alive, but it grows." After a moment, Andy's eyes lit up. "It's a fire. Fire grows when it has air, but water puts it out." The snake's eyes twinkled. "Correct. Very clever, little ant. Follow me, and I'll guide you through." With the snake's help, Andy and Carlos made their way through the maze of roots. They thanked the snake as they emerged on the other side, grateful for his guidance. Chapter 3, Pebble Pass. Beyond the twisted roots lay Pebble Pass, a stretch of the garden covered in smooth, round pebbles. The pebbles created a bumpy landscape that was difficult to navigate, especially for someone as small as Andy. Carlos, being much bigger and stronger, helped Andy climb over the larger pebbles. They jumped from stone to stone, making their way through the pass. But as they reached the middle, they encountered a problem. A large bird swooped down from above, its eyes fixed on them. "Look out, Carlos!" Andy shouted, grabbing his friend's arm. The bird circled above, its wings casting a shadow over the pebbles. It was looking for food, and Andy and Carlos were the perfect size for a snack. "We have to hide," Andy whispered, pointing to a small crevice between two large pebbles. They quickly squeezed into the crevice, holding their breath as the bird circled above. The bird's sharp beak pecked around the pebbles, but it couldn't reach them in their hiding spot. After a few tense moments, the bird gave up and flew away. Andy and Carlos sighed with relief and crawled out of their hiding spot. "That was close," Carlos said, his eyes wide. Thanks for thinking fast, Andy. Andy smiled. That's what friends are for. We've got to keep an eye out for more birds as we cross. Together, they navigated the rest of Pebble Pass, keeping low and moving quickly until they were safely on the other side. Chapter 4, The Lost City of Glitterstone. Finally, after a long journey, Andy and Carlos reached a clearing surrounded by tall grasses and flowers. In the center of the clearing, they saw it, the lost city of Glitterstone. It was a magnificent sight. Tiny crystal towers sparkled in the sunlight, and walls made of shiny leaves and stones shimmered with every color of the rainbow. Paths paved with glittering pebbles led to a grand entrance, guarded by a small team of beetles wearing armor made of shiny shells. Carlos's mouth dropped open. We found it, Andy. The lost city is real. Andy grinned. And look at all those treasures. Crystals and glittering stones. The stories were true. The beetles approached, their eyes watching the two friends carefully. Welcome, travelers, said the lead beetle. You have found the lost city of Glitterstone, but only those who come with pure hearts and good intentions may enter. Andy and Carlos nodded. We seek nothing but the chance to explore and learn, Andy said. We want to bring some of the treasures back to our friends to help them. The beetle leader smiled. Your words are true. We grant you permission to explore our city. Andy and Carlos entered the lost city, marveling at the glowing crystals and the sparkling streets. The beetles guided them to a great hall, where they met the wise old cricket who ruled the city. Welcome, little ones, the cricket said. You have proven your bravery and kindness. We will share our treasures with you. Andy and Carlos were given a small bag of glowing crystals, which they knew would be enough to light their colony's tunnels and make life easier for all their friends. They thanked the cricket and the beetles, feeling proud and grateful. Chapter 5, The Journey Home. With the treasure safely stored in Carlos's leaf sack, Andy and Carlos began their journey home. They retraced their steps, crossing Pebble Pass, navigating the twisted roots with the snake's help, and floating back across the muddy river. When they finally reached their clover patch home, they were welcomed by the ant colony and the other creatures of the garden. Everyone was amazed by their glowing crystals and listened with wide eyes as Andy and Carlos told the tale of their journey. Thanks to these treasures, Andy said, we'll have light to guide us through the tunnels, and we can share the magic of the lost city with everyone. Carlos beamed. And all it took was a little bit of teamwork and courage. From that day on, Andy and Carlos were celebrated as heroes of the garden. They had proven that, with friendship, bravery, and a little bit of adventure, anything was possible. The two friends continued to explore the garden, but no matter where they went, they always knew that home was the best treasure of all. And so, as the stars twinkled above the garden, Andy and Carlos settled in their cozy clover patch, dreaming of their next big adventure. But for now, they were content, surrounded by friends and the glow of their magical crystals. The end.